We've seen plenty of games look incredible before release, but honestly, very few have looked quite like this. Phantom Blade Zero almost looks too good to be real. And that leaves me with one pretty obvious question. Is it? And now we finally have something much more important than another trailer. Almost 20 minutes of new gameplay. The latest state of play gave us our clearest look yet at what Phantom Blade Zero actually feels like as a game. We got a much deeper look at the combat, the weapons, the world, the difficulty options, and some of the systems hiding underneath all those incredible animations. And honestly, there's a lot more going on here than I expected. We're talking about more than 50 different weapons, multiple ways to approach combat, new enemies, side content, and a much better look at the world we'll actually be exploring. More importantly, we finally got to see longer stretches of the game without everything being hidden behind a 30-second montage. And that's exactly what I wanted to see. Because Phantom Blade Zero has never had a problem looking impressive. The question has always been whether there's a real game underneath all that spectacle. And after this state of play, I think we're finally getting closer to an answer. Phantom Blade Zero isn't exactly a new name anymore. We've been watching this game for years now, and somehow, every time S-Game shows us more, the expectations get even higher. You play as Soul, an assassin caught in the middle of a conspiracy, with only a limited amount of time left to uncover the truth. But let's be honest, the story probably isn't what made most people stop and pay attention to this game. It was the combat. And once you see it in motion, it's pretty easy to understand why. Combat is probably the first thing you'll notice about Phantom Blade Zero. It's incredibly fast, aggressive, and at times, almost ridiculously cinematic. But the more footage I watch, the more I think speed isn't actually what makes it so interesting. It's the way everything flows together. Attacks move naturally into counters, counters into dodges, and before one enemy has even hit the ground, you're already moving towards the next. And that's what makes it look so different. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like you're watching someone play an action RPG. It feels like you're watching a martial arts movie. Except somebody is actually controlling it. And that's also where I start to have a few questions. Because we've all seen games that looked incredible in trailers. You get the perfect encounter, the perfect camera angle, the perfect animation, and everything is edited together to make the game look as good as possible. But that's not the same thing as actually playing it. A 2-minute trailer doesn't tell you what combat feels like after 10 hours. It doesn't tell you whether enemies stay interesting, whether the mechanics have enough depth, or whether all of this incredible movement still feels satisfying after you've done it hundreds of times. And that's the challenge Phantom Blade Zero has created for itself. It doesn't just look good. It looks so good that the final game now has to live up to it. And I also think calling Phantom Blade Zero just another Souls-like misses the point. Sure, you can see some of the influence. There's a dark world, dangerous enemies, precise combat, and bosses that look like they could destroy you in seconds. But the actual philosophy behind the fighting seems very different. Phantom Blade Zero wants you moving forward. It wants you attacking, reacting, and constantly transitioning between offense and defense. The combat doesn't look deliberately slow or heavy. It looks almost choreographed. And I think that's an important distinction. The goal doesn't seem to be making every fight feel difficult just for the sake of being difficult. The goal is making every fight flow. But there's another part of Phantom Blade Zero that I think is getting slightly overshadowed by all that combat. The world itself. There's this fascinating mixture of Chinese martial arts, dark fantasy, and an almost dreamlike atmosphere running through everything we've seen. The architecture, the landscapes, the characters, even some of the enemies look like they belong somewhere between history, mythology, and a nightmare. And somehow, it works. I already know that I want to fight in this world. What I don't know yet is whether I'm going to want to explore every corner of it. And for a game like this, that's going to matter. And then S-Game revealed something I definitely wasn't expecting. Donnie Yen. And honestly, it's difficult to think of someone who fits this game better. His entire career has been built around making martial arts look incredibly fast, precise, and effortless on screen. And that's basically the same philosophy Phantom Blade Zero seems to be chasing with its combat. Because this game isn't just trying to make fighting effective, it's trying to make it look beautiful. And that's really what everything comes back to. Phantom Blade Zero knows exactly how it wants you to feel when you're playing it. Fast, precise, aggressive, but always in control. And after everything we've seen, I'm starting to think the biggest challenge isn't going to be making the combat look good. It's going to be keeping that feeling alive for the entire game. Because we've seen the weapons, we've seen the bosses, we've seen the world, and we've seen enough uninterrupted gameplay to know there's more here than a collection of perfectly edited trailers. But there are still things a state of play simply can't tell us. How does the combat feel after 15 or 20 hours? Does learning a new weapon actually change the way you play? Does exploring this world stay interesting when there isn't a spectacular boss waiting around every corner? And most importantly, does controlling Soul actually feel as smooth as it looks? Those are questions we won't be able to answer until we play it ourselves. But that's also why I'm much more interested in Phantom Blade Zero now than I was before. So let's go back to the question we started with. Is Phantom Blade Zero really as good as it looks? I don't know yet. And honestly, nobody does. But I do think we've seen enough to say that this isn't just another game hiding behind an incredible trailer. There's something real underneath all that spectacle. The combat has its own identity. The world has a style that's immediately recognizable. And the more S-Game shows us, the less this feels like a game that's simply borrowing ideas from everything around it. It doesn't need to be the next Dark Souls. It doesn't need to be the next Sekiro. It needs to be Phantom Blade Zero. And if the final game can make playing these fights feel even half as good as watching them, then we might be looking at something very special.